Hello, my name is John Fierst. I'm the librarian at the Clarke Historical Library. Today is December 10th, 2009. I'm talking with Greg Benford of Benford Land Services. Greg is a consultant who does professional title research, and we're going to be talking about a collection we have at the Clarke called the Isabella County Abstracts of Title. This is a collection made up of two sets of title books for each one of the townships in Isabella County. There's 16 townships in Isabella County. They were donated to the Clarke Library in the 1970s by the Isabella County Abstract Company. Greg will explain the origin and use of these books and what they have to offer researchers today who come to visit the Clarke Library.
Let me give you a little bit of my background. I got into the title business in late 1971 and went to work for my father, who at the time was the owner of Isabella County Abstract Company. These books that we're going to be talking about today were in our office, and we used them for title research, and a few other people would come in from time to time and use them for historical research. I stayed with the company and became a part owner for 27 years, and then sold the business in about 10 or 11 years ago, and worked for the new owner for the next 10 years, and then basically retired out of the company about a year and a half ago. And I started Benford Land Services, and I do independent title research now for basically anybody that'll hire me, but prevalently it's attorneys and survey companies that I do a lot of work for, and oil companies. These books that we're going to talk about are basically they're abstracts of title. They're a history of the deeds and the mortgages and other documents that are recorded with the county courthouse that affect property in Isabella County. Let me explain just a little bit about the United States government survey system so you can get an understanding of how land is described in Michigan and pretty much throughout the Midwest and the United States. Isabella County is comprised of 16 townships. Each township has 36 separate sections, and each section is 1 square mile. They then take the sections and they quarter it. So you would have, for example, the northeast quarter of a section, the northwest quarter of a section, and so on. Then they would quarter each of the quarters, and we're now down to quarter corners. So a typical description for 40 acres would be something like the northeast quarter of Section 1 of a particular township in Isabella County. And that's how these books are set up. When you open them up, each section is labeled at the top, and then it's further defined by the quarter section that these records are in. Okay? The origin of these books, I really can't tell you how they originated, but probably they were made by old county abstractors way back in the 1800s. And they were added to through the years by subsequent abstractors, and they're all scrolled, they're all handwritten, and they start about 1851, and they go up through the early 1900s, probably 1905, 1910, somewhere in there, and then they end. Isabella County Abstract Company got these books probably through the purchase of various abstractors in the county when they were in business. And we used them for many years, and then in the mid to late 1970s, my father decided that we would film these books and keep a microfilm copy of them, and then through a friend of his at the Clarke Historical Library decided to donate them all to the Clarke for, preservation.
The one thing I was going to ask about was basically abstracts or titles are kept in the county courthouse, right?
Right.
And how do you use these books in conjunction with those records in the county courthouse?
These books, let me explain the information that's on these books. The first column gives the legal description. For example, the first entry on this particular page describes the northeast one quarter of the northeast one quarter of Section 13 in Township 15 North, Range 3 West. And the entry here is where the United States conveys the property to what appears to be a Native American. It gives a date of that document. It gives the filing date with the courthouse, and it gives a number that we call the Liber and page of the document, and that's where you would find it in the courthouse. Liber means book, okay? And if you were to go into the Register of Deeds office at the courthouse and walk into their vault, the old records would be actual huge books called libers, and each liber contains so many pages. And if you had the liber and page, you could pull that liber out, open it up to that page, and find your document, whether it's a deed or a mortgage or a federal land grant. And then as you scroll down, you can see the actual, where that person would have sold it to the next person in line, and right on down the line. And in each case, it gives the name of the first party, the second party, the date, the liber and page of the document, and when it was recorded. And a researcher could come into the Clarke and look at these records, and if they're looking for particular conveyances of a piece of property, they could write down the libers and pages that they find in these books. Then they would go to the courthouse, and they'd actually look up the documents themselves. They'd find the liber books, and more recent records are kept, they're digitized, but they're still called libers. When you punch it into the computer, you have to type what liber number you want and then what page number.
Okay. Why would they go to the trouble of keeping these books if they could just go to the courthouse instead?
Well, that's a good question. The courthouse records, first of all, the state of Michigan requires that County Register of Deeds keep a grantor-grantee index, and that's all they're required to keep. They don't keep track indexes. Track indexes are where the documents are categorized by legal description. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if you have a legal description, you could go to the track index, and that's what these books are, and find all the documents that affect that piece of property. Grantor-grantee index only has the names and the liber and page of the document that name appears on.
So you need to know the name of the people
you need to know the name of the people that you're looking for.
Okay.
And if you're trying to find the history of a particular parcel of land and you don't have names, you wouldn't be able to research it in the courthouse. Okay?
That's the big difference.
That's the big difference right there.
So basically you can follow like you were saying, the conveyance of title right down the page.
Correct.
And these
Correct.
volumes.
That's right.
And who kept the volumes? Who had to do that? I mean, whose handwriting is all of this?
I wish I could tell you that, John. It's pretty nice handwriting, actually, and you can see, if you look at the books, that the handwriting changes throughout the years. In other words, it starts out, it appears that maybe perhaps these first 6 or so entries are the same handwriting. And then it changes, as you can see. Okay. And as you get on down, you can see the different types of handwriting that were used. The first entry on this page is 1871, and the last entry is 1903.
So would they have been? I'm thinking about something that we discussed earlier, not in this interview, but earlier, about how you would go to the courthouse. I know it was when you were actually working for the Isabella County Abstract Company. You said you'd get the abstracts that were put in that were entered every day in the courthouse, and then you would bring them back to the office and record them in these.
That's right. Our company, I say our company, Isabella County Abstract Company, kept a complete separate set of records and indexes of all the records in Isabella County. And what we would do is we would purchase copies of all documents recorded pretty much on a daily basis, although sometimes we'd pick them up maybe every 4 days or maybe once a week, okay? And we'd bring them back to our office, and we would enter them into our own, what you might call abstract books or indexes, and they were all kept by legal description. So if somebody called us and said, we need to have you prepare an abstract, and here's the legal description, that's all we needed to do that. Okay. We didn't need any names or anything else because we would find everything the way we kept them. And essentially, these books are the historical part of those records that start in 1851 and go to 1903 or 1910.
Okay.
Our indexes that we had after this were a little bit more refined and actually didn't contain quite as much information as these books. They were more streamlined.
So, with these particular volumes, an historian could make good use of this, I would think. One of the things I'm just noticing in them are the many Native American names that are identified.
There are a lot of them. Yeah, in Isabella County, under a couple of treaties that were enacted back in the 1800s, there were essentially 6 townships that were set aside for Native American land allotments, okay? Where the government said that if we haven't already disposed of land in these 6 townships, we'll reserve it for giving to your people, okay? So if you look, in Denver was one of them. This is Denver Township, Township 15 North, Range 3 West. If you look at many of the first document usually will be the U.S. federal land grant, or we call them patents.
Okay.
Okay. And if you look on both these pages, you can see where the first entry is, in fact, from the United States to a Native American. Okay. So in the 6 townships, you'll find most of the property originally was granted to a Native American. And then if you look, for example, John, let's look at the one that you have here.
All right.
There's a warranty deed.
All right.
Okay. And it goes to this person in 1876. So this particular Native American got this grant in 1871, and they sold it in 1876, it would appear.
What else do we learn from this? I mean, we learned the date that they actually got it, right? We learned
we learned the date,
parcel of land that they got.
The actual parcel of land. There's the library page. There's the recording date. And there's the consideration on the deed, $50.
So they sold it for $50.
They sold it for $50.
Okay. And now I notice over here there's something called remarks and the word trespass in that. What does that mean?
It's an old legal term that meant that if anybody had a right to trespass on the property, okay, when you were conveying the property, you were either making it subject to those rights. In other words, there are people out there that have rights to trespass. And so I'm telling you that right now.
Okay. All right.
Or you may have some, perhaps, timber contracts where they sold the timber off, and people would have a right to trespass to remove the timber.
Okay.
So what you're also doing is you're conveying your rights as a landowner
So
to collect for the timber that these people might take off the property.
So the concern isn't just the parcel of land; it's all the rights and everything.
It's all the rights that go with it, right? And if you look down your remarks, you can see that term is used quite often. You'll also notice that in some cases you have where these deeds are conveying only timber rights. This is pine timber on this particular document.
So they aren't selling. They aren't selling the land; they're just selling the rights in that case.
Right. Right. So when you say trespass, you're conveying your rights as the owner with a timber contract.
Okay.
Okay. And quite often, when you sold the timber, you would say, "You're going to pay me so much a year." Okay? Or maybe you pay me a flat fee right now, and then you can have all the timber that's now standing. And once you take that off, and it's replanted, then you don't get what's replanted.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
Depends on what the contract says.
I had another question here. So each of these entries will show what you call the Lieber page. So they could take that information and then go to the courthouse and look up the actual abstract.
Actual document.
Actual document. What would they learn from that document that they wouldn't learn from this?
Well, it probably has a little more information on it. I wish I would have brought one with me. I could have done that had I thought far enough in advance here. It's the actual document. Like, have you ever seen the deed to your house?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
And maybe the mortgage that you have on it. Do you have a copy of that?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's the document I'm talking about.
Unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, right. And the deeds that were used back in the 1800s are essentially the same as they are today. The information that's contained is pretty much the same.
You might find different people signing that abstract, though, too, right? Or witnessing it.
Well, there certainly, that's a good point. Yeah. You're going to have, back then, it would be required in Michigan to have 2 witnesses and a notary public on that document. And sometimes you can tell quite a lot by who witnessed something, who the witnesses were. Were they lay people? Maybe they were bankers. Maybe you say, oh, I remember that witness. I know that person. That person was a banker in town, or that person was a lawyer. Okay. And the same with a notary. You might know a particular notary. So if you had a question about one of the parties on the document, you could go to the notary public and say, do you know these people? Usually the notaries, knew who the people were. So, if you're really trying to trace some people down, and you can't trace down the actual party to the document, the one that signed it, maybe the notary could help you there, if you could contact the notary or their family members. Certainly, the records you're going to find in these books, these people mostly are long gone,
right?
Because they happened back in the 1800s.
Yeah.
But
that's really a complete history of the entire county, isn't it? I mean,
a complete history for the period from actual commencement of the county, the first recording, which was 1851, right up to the early 1900s.
Or you could find a lot about timber rights.
Well, certainly. I know that the research I was doing this summer in the library, that you helped me greatly with, I noticed a reoccurring name on a lot of the documents that I was looking at.
Okay.
And so I did some research on this particular person, okay, and found out who they were. And they were a political player in Isabella County back in the 1800s. Okay. Pretty interesting, actually.
Well, I found it really interesting to talk to you about the volumes because I've seen them sitting there, but I've never really realized how valuable they are or how much information they contain, and just what a wonderful record they are.
They really are. The project, I can't talk an awful lot about the project I worked on, but when I was trying to determine how I was going to tackle this project, I was hired to do some research, historical title research, and it dawned on me that you had these books here. And so that's when I initially contacted you and said,
you had given them to us originally.
Yeah, our office had given them to you, and I was hoping you still had them.
We did still have them.
Yeah, and that's when I contacted the Clarke and said, do you still have these books? And sure enough, you did, and they've been well preserved. And do you get a lot of people in using them?
Well, I think that's one of the reasons I really want to do this podcast,
right,
is that I think if people were aware of what they contain or how they could be used, I think we'll get a lot of use from them. Actually, I mean, you can literally, the spot of land that you owned in Isabella County, right, you can really trace back its
all the way to the beginning.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think if people realize they can do that, we'll probably get considerable use of them. So I really appreciate you coming and talking about them, as well as having donated them to the library in the first place.